The matchhead scrapes phosphorus against striker. The sound cuts through frozen silence like tearing paper. Sulfur blooms in the December darkness, sharp and acrid, unmistakable. The flame gutters in the wind, sweeping through Hurtgen Forest, but it holds. Orange light pushes back against the blackness at 0530 hours on December 9th, 1944. Jesse Franklin Hart holds it steady, 15 yards from where he actually stands. The secondary position, the decoy nest, the exact spot any careless sniper might have chosen. Visible, obvious, wrong. 3 seconds, that's all it takes. The flame dies between his fingers. Jesse moves silent as thought itself back to the real. Hide the good position, the one he chose 2 hours ago, when the forest was still black and frost thick enough to make breathing visible. Through the scope now, waiting. The kind of patience his father taught him in the coal mines of Harlan County, Kentucky. The patience that keeps a man alive when the mountain wants him dead. 8 seconds pass, movement, 60 yards out. A German head adjusts, just a fraction, maybe an eighth of an inch, invisible to the naked eye. Clear as gospel through the Springfield's 4-power optic. The enemy is tracking the light source, following the stimulus, obeying the reflex that every soldier carries, that every human being carries, the one that says when you see fire in a combat zone, you mark it, you locate it, you respond. Jesse breathes out slow. The trigger breaks clean. One shot. The German drops without a sound, just waits, surrendering to gravity. Here, then gone. The forest swallows him back into its shadows and its silence. Beside Jesse, Tommy Brennan freezes behind the binoculars. His voice comes out strangled, barely above a whisper. What in God's name? Jesse says nothing. Opens his notebook, makes one mark with a pencil stub. The graphite scratches against cheap paper. That small sound somehow louder than the rifle shot in his memory. By midnight, he will have 14 more marks in that book. By the end of the week, the number will reach 67. Not through better shooting, through better thinking. This is the story of how a 5-cent matchbox destroyed a German sniper network that the United States Army could not crack in 2 weeks of trying. How a coal miner's son from a town of 427 souls learned to turn human reflexes into a weapon. How doctrine became vulnerability. How light became death. And how the man who did it spent 63 years trying to forget he ever learned the trick. Subscribe now if you want to hear stories of ordinary people who changed history through pure ingenuity. This one will stay with you. Harlan County, Kentucky, 1918. The year the Great War ended. The year the mines of eastern Kentucky pulled more coal from the earth than any place in America. The year Jesse Franklin Hart was born into a world that taught him one lesson above all others. Read the rhythms or die. Harlan County, population 427 when the census man bothered to count. A town that existed because anthracite coal existed beneath it. When the seams played out, the town would vanish. Everyone knew this. Nobody spoke of it. You did not question the mine. You went into the mountain each morning, and you came out each night, and you were grateful the mathematics worked in your favor one more time. John Samuel Hart worked the deep shafts, the places where the ceiling came down to 4 feet and a man crawled on his belly through water and darkness, where the air tasted like metal and your lamp showed you exactly how small the space was that might become your tomb. John Hart taught his son to notice things, the way a timber beam sounded different when the weight above it shifted, how a canary slowed down before the gas came, the metallic taste on your tongue that meant methane was building somewhere in the black. These were not academic lessons. They were survival instructions. Miss the signs and the mountain killed you. Simple as that, Jesse learned. He learned that the world tells you what is coming if you know how to listen, that sequences exist everywhere, that most men ignore them until it's too late, that the difference between living and dying is often just a matter of noticing what everyone else dismisses. It was 1925. Jesse was 7 years old when his father took him to the mine entrance for the first time. Not deep inside, just to the mouth, to the place where daylight ended and something else began. The darkness there was absolute, not the darkness of a moonless night. This was the darkness that swallows your lamp after 30 feet, the kind that has weight and texture, the kind that makes you understand why men go crazy in the deep shafts. John Hart knelt beside his son, His hands were scarred from 20 years of work. His voice was quiet but certain. Boy, the mind don't lie. Men lie. Equipment lies. But the mind, it tells you exactly what it's going to do. You just got to learn its language. He showed Jesse how to listen to the timber beams, how the pitch changed under weight shift, how you could hear the mountains settling, adjusting, preparing to move. It wasn't magic, it was physics. Stress and strain translated into sound. He showed him the canary cage, the small yellow bird that would slow down, then stop singing, then die before the methane reached levels that would kill a man. A living alarm system, biology as technology. He taught him about the taste of metal on your tongue, iron in the air, gas building in pockets you couldn't see, your body telling you what your eyes couldn't. Everything has a sequence, Jesse. Find it and you control it. Miss it and it controls you. Jesse took those words and wrote them in his mind like scripture. For the next 8 years, he watched his father go into that mountain every morning. Watched him come out every evening, a little grayer, a little more bent, a little closer to the day. The rhythms would shift faster than he could read them. That day came in December 1935. Jesse was 17 years old. The alarm siren cut through the afternoon. 3 blasts, the signal every miner's family dreaded. The signal that meant men were trapped below. Jesse ran to the pit head with his mother Eleanor and his sisters Martha and Ruth. Other families were already gathering. Wives, children, everyone quiet, everyone knowing. The radio at the surface crackled with fragments. Section D, gas ignition. Main support collapsed. 14 men trapped. Eleanor stood with her hands folded. She did not cry. Not yet. That would come later. Right now, she just stood and waited with the terrible patience of a woman who had married a miner and understood the contract. 6 hours they waited. The rescue crews went down, came back up, went down again. The family stayed. Nobody left. Nobody spoke much. There was nothing to say that hadn't been said 1,000 times before in mining towns across Appalachia. When they brought the bodies up, John Samuel Hart was number 14, the last one retrieved. Jesse saw his father's body on the stretcher, saw the coal dust that would never wash out of the creases in his face, saw the empty canary cage still clutched in his right hand. That detail broke something open in Jesse's chest. The cage was empty, which meant his father had seen the bird die, had known the gas was coming, had read the sequence perfectly. He just couldn't move fast enough. The mountain had spoken its language clearly. John Hart had understood every word. And it hadn't mattered. Understanding wasn't enough. Prediction had to come before reaction. You had to see what was coming soon enough to act. That was the lesson Jesse carved into his bones that December afternoon. The mining company sent Eleanor $20 and a letter expressing regret for her loss. $20 for a man who had given them 20 years. $20 to feed a widow and 3 children. Jesse, 17 years old, became the man of the house. Martha was 15. Ruth was 12. Both needed schooling. Eleanor's teaching certificate was worthless. Married women couldn't teach in Kentucky. She had given up that career when she married John. Jesse could have gone into the mines, could have followed his father down into the darkness. The company would have hired him. They always needed bodies. But Eleanor forbade it, not because she was afraid of losing him, though she was, because losing both the men in her life to the same mountain seemed like a failure of imagination. Like refusing to learn from the sequence. So Jesse found another way. Hunting. Jesse was 12 when his father first handed him the rifle. A Winchester Model 67 single-shot .22. That was 1935 years before the mine took John Hart's life. You loaded 1 round and you made it count because cartridges cost money the family did not have. His father's words still echoed. You missed that rabbit, boy. The family eats less this week. So don't miss. At first, Jesse did miss. 3 shots in the first week, 3 rabbits that bounded away, 3 evenings his mother stretched the stew thinner, 3 nights Jesse lay awake feeling the weight of his failure. So he stopped shooting, started watching instead. He spent an entire afternoon observing 1 rabbit. 45 minutes crouched in the underbrush, not moving, barely breathing, just watching. His finger never touched the trigger. His eye never left the animal. He saw things most hunters never noticed. Rabbits freeze when startled. Everyone knows this. It's the famous freeze response. What most people don't know is what happens next. The freeze lasts 3 to 5 seconds. Then comes the tell, a twitch of the ear, a shift in the haunches, micro movements that telegraph the bolt before it happens. The rabbit is making a decision. The body announces that decision half a second before execution. Jesse learned to read those movements, to see the decision before the rabbit made it, to fire at the position the animal would occupy half a second from now, rather than the position it held in the present. He would toss a rock. The rabbit would freeze. Jesse would watch through the iron sights and wait for the ear to twitch, then squeeze. By the time Jesse was 14, he had refined the method. 14 rabbits over 2 weeks, 14 shots, 14 kills. The neighbor who watched him do it crossed himself and muttered something about witchcraft, about deals with the devil, about unnatural gifts. Eleanor Hart knew better. Not witchcraft, Jesse. You're reading them, like your father read the mind. Understanding behavior isn't magic. It's survival. By 1941, Jesse Franklin Hart had a reputation in 3 counties. Best hunter anyone had seen. Quiet, methodical, almost unsettling in his efficiency. He didn't boast, didn't waste, just brought home meat and sold the surplus and kept his family fed. He had become a shift supervisor at the mine by then. Surface work, managing crews, never going down into the deep shafts. Eleanor had made him promise. He kept that promise. He also kept a notebook. Started it when he was 14. Filled it with observations, behavioral sequences of animals, rhythms of weather, movement tendencies of people, how they moved, how they reacted, how they revealed themselves without knowing it. He didn't talk about the notebook. It was private, personal. The place where he worked out the mathematics of prediction. December 7th, 1941, changed everything. Jesse was 23 years old, eating lunch in the supervisor's shack at the mine when the radio announcement came through. Pearl Harbor, Japanese attack, America at war. He looked around at the other men, watched their faces, saw the sequence of emotions ripple through the room. Shock, anger, fear, patriotism, a complex wave of human response, as predictable in its way as a rabbit's freeze reflex. He enlisted the next morning. December 8th, 1941. First man from Harlan County to sign the papers. Eleanor was waiting when he got home that afternoon. "You're all I got left of your father, Jesse." Her voice was steady, but her eyes were not. Jesse sat down across from her at the kitchen table. The same table where they had stretched stew thin, where they had learned to survive on less, where they had rebuilt a life after the mine took John Hart. "That's why I gotta go, Mama. He taught me to read danger. Maybe I can keep other boys' fathers alive." It wasn't patriotism exactly. It wasn't glory-seeking. It was something simpler and deeper. A debt to his father's memory. An obligation to use what he had learned. He hugged Martha, 21 now, and engaged to a local boy. Hugged Ruth, 18, and planning to become a nurse. Told them both to take care of their mother. Then he left for war. Camp Perry, Ohio, January 1942. Sniper selection course. 200 recruits, every single one a perfect marksman already. You didn't get sent to sniper school unless you could shoot. Perfect scores on the rifle range were the minimum requirement. The baseline, the price of admission. The instructors were looking for something else, something harder to quantify. Patience, discipline, the ability to lie motionless for hours, the temperament to kill from distance without hesitation or remorse. Jesse qualified on all counts, but he stood out for different reasons. He asked strange questions. What makes an enemy look at something involuntarily? Can you trigger an exposure without revealing your own position? If you understand how a man thinks under stress, can you predict where he'll aim before he aims there? The head instructor was Sergeant Marcus Morrison, 46 years old, veteran of the Great War, 2 years in the trenches, 15 confirmed kills with a Springfield 1903 in the Argonne Forest. Morrison shut down those questions fast. Sniping is patience, Hart. It's about discipline. You hide, you wait, you take the shot when the opportunity presents itself. You don't manipulate. You don't bait. You don't play games. You follow doctrine. Jesse nodded. Said yes, Sergeant. Wrote the answer down in his notebook. Not because he agreed, because he was cataloging another rhythm. The rhythm of military doctrine. The rhythm of men who believed the manual contained all possible answers. The rhythm of thinking that prioritized established method over innovation. He filed that information away for later. They paired him with Tommy Brennan in March, 22 years old from Philadelphia. Irish Catholic family. 6 brothers. Working class through and through. Tommy believed in the rule book the way some men believe in scripture. He was loud where Jesse was quiet, talkative where Jesse was silent, optimistic where Jesse was cautious. But Tommy could read terrain, and he could spot wind, and he did not panic when the shooting started. That was enough. They shipped out for England in May, trained with the 28th Infantry Division through the spring, prepared for the invasion everyone knew was coming. You count their breaths, Hart Tommy asked him that one afternoon during a training exercise. They were tracking a simulated enemy position. Jesse had been motionless for 20 minutes just watching. Everything has a rhythm, Tommy, even dying. Tommy didn't understand, not then, but he would. June 6, 1944. Omaha Beach. Jesse went ashore with the second wave. The landing craft ramp dropped and hell opened up. MG-42 machine guns from the bluffs. Mortars, artillery. The water red with blood before they even reached sand. Jesse survived not through luck, but through observation. In the landing craft waiting for the ramp to drop, he had watched the tracer fire sequence. Watched the MG-42 bursts. 6 seconds of fire. 4 seconds of pause while the gunner changed barrels. The guns overheated. Had to be swapped out. It was mechanical. Predictable. Move on the 4th second of the pause, he told his squad. Not before, not after. The 4th second. They listened. His squad had 80% survival rate on that beach. The squad to their left had 40%. The difference was timing. The difference was reading the rhythm. Jesse moved inland with the 28th Infantry Division, through the hedgerows of Normandy, through the summer fighting. 17 confirmed kills in 3 months. Nothing spectacular. All methodical, all predicted. Tommy said it best one night in August. You don't hunt them, Jesse. You solve them. That was exactly right. Jesse didn't see enemies as targets to be engaged. He saw them as equations to be solved. Problems with variables. If X, then Y. If stimulus, then response. If sequence, then outcome. It was mathematics. It was physics. It was biology. It wasn't personal. At least that's what Jesse told himself. September 1944 brought new orders. The 28th Infantry Division was being moved to the German border, to a place called Hurtgen Forest, to a piece of ground that would earn the name the Green Hell. The intelligence briefing painted a clear picture. Heavy German fortifications, interlocking fields of fire, and a sniper network so effective it had turned the forest into a killing ground. 47 American casualties in 1 week, the intelligence officer said, all from sniper fire. 0 confirmed German kills in return. The officer explained why standard counter-sniper tactics weren't working. The forest was too dense, 90% canopy coverage. You walked in permanent twilight. Your eyes adjusted, but they never adapted. Visibility maxed out at 30 yards on a clear day. Most days you got 15. Sound didn't travel right. The trees and undergrowth created acoustic dead zones. You heard a rifle shot, and you couldn't tell if it came from 50 yards or 500. Couldn't tell direction. Couldn't tell elevation. The forest swallowed noise and gave back confusion. There were no sight lines, no clean shooting lanes, no places where you could see more than a few dozen yards in any direction. The German snipers owned every ridge and every approach. They had spent weeks preparing, cutting hides into the terrain, building firing slits that were invisible until you were already dead. The American infantry learned a phrase in the first week. If it moves, it dies. Then they learned this corollary. If it doesn't move, it still might die. Morale collapsed. Men refused to advance. Entire companies pinned down by enemies they could not see, could not locate, could not kill. The officers tried everything. Counter-sniper teams, 6 teams sent out, 4 killed, 2 retreated without contact. Artillery bombardment, shelling suspected positions. The shells just tore up empty forest. The Germans were in deep bunkers. The explosions were spectacle without effect. Night movement, trying to flank under cover of darkness. Worse visibility led to more casualties. From German patrols, from accidents, from friendly fire, smoke screens, covering infantry advances. The Germans just waited for the smoke to clear. They knew exactly where to aim. Nothing worked. The casualties mounted. December 1st through 7th. 47 Americans dead in Jesse's assigned sector. 0 German casualties confirmed. 0 yards of ground gained. Jesse spent that first week just watching. He didn't fire a single shot, didn't engage, didn't hunt, just observed. Tommy was frustrated. "We're supposed to be killing them," he hissed on day 5. "I am," Jesse said. "I'm hunting their framework." He filled his notebook with observations. The Germans were trained to watch for 3 primary indicators of enemy presence: movement, sound, light. In Hurtgen, movement was scarce because movement drew fire. Sound was unreliable because the forest distorted it. Muzzle flash was nearly invisible under the canopy. That left light. Light was the only stimulus that traveled cleanly through the forest, the only signal that could not be hidden or disguised, the only universal trigger that every soldier responded to regardless of training. Jesse started testing his theory on December 8th evening, temperature dropping toward freezing. Him and Tommy in a shallow scrape behind a deadfall. Jesse pulled out a match, struck it, let it burn to warm his hands. Tommy's head turned toward the flame. Automatic, instant, a reflex he did not control. Jesse watched him do it. "You just proved it. Proved what reflex beats training. Even knowing I'm friendly, you looked." Jesse tested him 3 more times over the next 10 minutes. Same result every time. Every time the match flared, Tommy's eyes tracked to it. He could not help himself. The response was hardwired. Older than thought. Older than discipline. "If you can't stop yourself," Jesse said, "they can't either." He put the matchbox back in his pocket. Standard Army issue, 48 wooden matches, 5 cents from supply. Tomorrow he would test the theory on men who would shoot back. It was the human visual cortex. Evolution. Biology. In low-light environments, the brain prioritizes certain stimuli. Movement first. Predator detection. Then light. Fire means danger or resource or both. Then contrast. Edge detection. The response happens in the limbic system. The old brain, the part that existed before language, before tools, before thought. Training can modify it. Discipline can slow it. But nothing can eliminate it. Jesse understood this not from books but from observation, from watching animals, from watching men, from understanding that humans are just complex animals with the same basic wiring. The average response time was 6 to 8 seconds. The search arc was about 45 degrees from the light source. The exposure was fractional, maybe 1/8 of an inch of head movement, but through a 4-power scope at 60 yards 1/8 of an inch was enough. Enough for geometry, enough for a firing solution. Jesse's conclusion was simple. He didn't need to see the enemy first. He needed to make the enemy see him, or rather make them think they saw him. The plan required very little. A matchbox, 2 positions per hide, 1 real one decoy. A Springfield, 1903, A4 rifle with a 4-power scope. And patience. Total cost, 5 cents. Tommy looked at him like he was crazy. "You're going to hunt them with matches?" Jesse shook his head. "I'm going to hunt them with their own nervous systems." December 9th, 1944. 0400 hours. 2 hours before first light, Jesse and Tommy moved into position. They established the primary hide behind a cluster of shattered pines. Good sight lines to the suspected German position 60 yards out. A fallen timber pile that intelligence believed housed at least 2 snipers and a spotter. Jesse also established a secondary position, 15 yards south of the primary, obvious, visible from the German angle. The kind of spot a careless sniper might choose. Wrong for a dozen tactical reasons, but perfect for what Jesse needed. 0530 hours. The forest still dark. Frost thick on every surface. Jesse struck the first match. The sound was loud in the pre-dawn quiet. The sulfur smell was sharp and immediate. The flame caught, held. Orange glow pushed through the December darkness. But Jesse was not in the primary hide. He was at the decoy site, holding the match where it could be seen, where it would register, where evolution would do its work. 3 seconds. Long enough for the light to penetrate, long enough for biology to override training. He pinched it out between his fingers. Then he moved, silent and fast, back to the real nest where Tommy waited with the binoculars. Now came the waiting, the patience his father taught him, the patience that keeps a man alive when the mountain wants him dead. 8 seconds passed. Movement, Tommy whispered. Timber pile. Top right. Jesse saw it through the scope, not a silhouette, not a clear target, just a fractional adjustment, a German head turning, maybe an eighth of an inch, tracking back toward where the match had been, following the light, following the stimulus, following the reflex. The enemy was trying to be careful, trying to move slowly, trying not to expose himself. But he was moving, and movement gave direction. And direction was enough. Jesse had the geometry now, the angle, the range, the exact position of a man who thought he was still hidden. He breathed out slow. The trigger broke clean. The Springfield cracked. The sound sharp and final in the morning air. Through the scope, Jesse watched the German collapse. No drama, no Hollywood death, just a body that stopped working. Weight and gravity. Here and then gone. The forest swallowed him back into its shadows and its silence. Tommy was frozen, staring, his breathing shallow. What just happened? Jesse opened his notebook, made one mark with the pencil stub. The graphite scratched against cheap paper. That sounds somehow enormous in the aftermath. Confirmation, Jesse said, of what their doctrine is intact. Their reflexes are intact. Their predictability is intact. Tommy shook his head, not understanding. Not yet. But he would. By the end of this day, he would understand exactly what he was watching, and it would change something in him that could never be changed back. Jesse had 47 matches remaining in the box. 4 days to teach the Germans that everything they knew about light had just become the thing that would kill them. And somewhere deep in his chest, in a place he could not yet name, Jesse Franklin, Hart felt the first small crack of something that would take 63 years to fully break. 45 minutes later, Jesse did it again. Different position, same method. Strike the match at the decoy site. Move back to the real hide. Wait for the German to track the light. Fire when the geometry presents itself. Second kill, 0 return fire, 0 American exposure. The sun was coming up now. Weak gray light filtering through the canopy, not enough to illuminate, just enough to make the shadows less absolute. Tommy was finally starting to understand what he was watching. You're not fighting the snipers, he said. You're fighting their training. Jesse looked at him, something like approval in his eyes. Now you're learning. By 0800 hours, Jesse had 6 more kills. Not quickly, not frantically, methodically. The way a farmer works a field, the way a miner follows a seam. Each kill followed the same sequence. Strike the match at the false position. Move to the real hide. Wait for the response. Fire when the geometry reveals itself. Each kill added data to the framework. Jesse's notebook filled with numbers and angles and times. Response time averaged 6 to 8 seconds. The German observation arc swept roughly 45 degrees. Spotters moved first 2 to 3 seconds before the snipers themselves adjusted. Small differences, tiny variations. But Jesse cataloged them all. The mathematics of death refined into something clean and reproducible. Tommy watched the kills pile up with a mixture of fascination and growing unease. This was not combat the way he understood combat. Combat was chaos. Combat was chance. Combat was 2 forces colliding and hoping your violence exceeded theirs. This was something else. This was extraction. Pulling enemy soldiers out of concealment like pulling teeth from a jaw. Precise. Inevitable. Almost mechanical in its efficiency. By noon, 14 Germans had died. 14 matches struck. 14 exposures exploited. 6.5 hours of methodical extraction. 0 American casualties. 34 matches left in the box. 3 days remaining. The German sniper network in their sector had lost more men in one morning than the entire previous week. And the Americans were advancing. 200 yards of ground that had been impossible for 9 days. Infantry moving up without taking fire. Positions being secured. The line shifting forward. Tommy should have felt elated, should have felt victorious. Instead, he felt sick. After the 10th kill, he turned away from the binoculars, vomited into the frost-covered leaves, the sound raw and wet in the cold air. Jesse glanced over, said nothing, waited. Tommy wiped his mouth. His hands were shaking. They don't even know they're dying. It's not combat. It's something else. He could not find the word. Efficient Jesse finished for him. That's what keeps our guys alive. Does it keep you up at night? The question hung between them. Jesse looked back through the scope. Scanning, always scanning. Let's move positions, he said. Not an answer, but the only answer he was going to give. They displaced to a new hide 300 yards east. Set up again. Waited. Jesse struck another match. Another German responded. Another body dropped. The forest swallowed the sound and the killing continued. 4 miles behind German lines, Hauptmann Heinrich Richter stood in the command post bunker, reading casualty reports and trying to understand what was happening to his sniper network. Richter was 34 years old, professional hunter from the Bavarian Alps before the war. He understood stalking, understood patience, understood the psychology of men who kill from distance. He had been hunting chamois and red stag since he was 12 years old, had tracked wounded animals through terrain where one wrong step meant death. War was just another kind of hunting. He had told himself that in Russia, told himself that in France, had almost believed it. But this was not hunting. This was slaughter. 14 snipers dead in 6 hours, all in the same sector. No American casualties reported, no return fire, no engagement. Just men dying in their hides without ever seeing what killed them. The reports were fragmentary, confused. Radio operators trying to describe something they did not understand. Something is wrong with the American. He shoots men before they move. It's like he knows our positions. Richter had fought on the Eastern Front, had seen Soviet snipers who were very good, had lost men to them. But even the best Russian marksmen had to wait for an exposure, had to see the target before engaging. This American was different. He was creating the exposures, forcing them somehow, making German soldiers reveal themselves through some mechanism Richter could not identify from the reports. He called for the company intelligence officer, a nervous lieutenant named Weber who had been a school teacher before conscription. What do we know about the American sniper? Very little. Herr Hauptmann, single operator possibly working with a spotter, operating in grid sector 47, 14 confirmed kills as of 1100 hours. 14 in 6 hours. Yes, sir. Richter walked to the map table, studied the terrain. The kill locations formed a sequence. Not random, deliberate. The American was working a specific area, clearing it methodically like a man clearing brush. One section at a time. Do we have any survivors? Anyone who saw him? No, sir. Everyone who engaged is dead. Richter absorbed that. Every sniper who had tried to fight back was dead, which meant either the American was preternaturally lucky or he had found some method that prevented counter-engagement entirely. Issue new orders to all forward positions, Richter said. Tighten discipline. Do not react to anomalies. Do not investigate unusual activity. Do not break concealment for any reason except confirmed enemy movement. Weber wrote it down, looked uncertain. Sir, should we mention anything specific? Tell them to ignore light sources, Richter said. Flares, matches, flames, anything that might be bait. The American is using something to draw our men out. I don't know what, but light discipline is absolute from this moment. The orders went out by radio at 1300 hours. Every German sniper position in the Hurtgen sector received the same message. Do not react to light. Do not turn your head. Do not adjust position. Ignore matches completely. On paper, it was the correct tactical response. Identify the enemy methodology, issue countermeasures, deny the enemy his advantage. In practice, it was already too late, because Jesse Franklin Hart had anticipated this exact response, and he had already prepared the next evolution of his method. December 10th. Dawn came late and came wrong. Fog rolled through the forest like something alive, thick and wet and cold. The kind of fog that erased the world beyond 30 yards, that turned every tree into a ghost shape, that made sound die before it could travel. Most snipers would have packed up, would have waited for visibility to improve, would have cursed the weather and stayed hidden. Jesse looked at the fog and smiled. "This is better," he said. Tommy stared at him. "How in God's name is this better?" "Light travels farther than shapes in fog. Match flame will push through this soup long before you can see a man. Gives us advantage. Temporary but real." He was already moving, already planning. Yesterday he had pulled snipers out one at a time. Today he would pull entire teams. They crawled into a shallow depression overlooking a suspected German observation point, a tangle of fallen timber that intelligence believed housed at least 2 shooters and a spotter. Maybe more. Jesse did not scan the position for shapes. Shapes were useless in the fog. Instead, he studied the geometry of the terrain, the approach angles, the sight lines, the places where men would need to be to do their job. He pulled out 3 matches. Not 1, 3. Tommy watched with growing comprehension and growing dread. "You're not about to do what I think you're doing." "I am," Jesse said. He struck the first match 40 yards north of their hide, planted it on a thin strip of bark, let it burn openly. A beacon in the fog, 2 seconds. Out. 30 seconds passed. Jesse lit the second match. 30 yards west, same method. Let it burn. Visible. Obvious. Impossible to miss. 2 seconds. Out. Tommy tracked the German position through the binoculars. Saw nothing. The fog was too thick, no movement yet. Tommy whispered. "Wait for the third," Jesse said. 20 seconds later, match 3, 20 yards south of their position. Jesse let this one burn longer. 3 seconds. The flame flickering, a foot above the ground, clear as a lighthouse beacon in the gray soup of the morning. Out. And now Jesse did not move, did not reposition, just settled into the primary firing position and waited. Because 3 matches created a problem that 1 match did not. 1 match suggested a single point of attention. 2 matches suggested a sequence. 3 matches forced a decision, a prioritization. And prioritization required movement. From the German hide came the response Jesse had predicted. 2 separate adjustments, 2 heads turning, 2 bodies shifting to track 3 different light sources and determine which represented the greatest threat. The moment they moved, they exposed themselves. 2 in the pile, Tommy murmured. "Left and center," good, Jesse said. He crawled forward 15 yards, not toward the Germans, but toward a small rise that gave him a sharper angle to the suspected positions. He struck the 4th match. This one he did not hold in a false position. He planted it, let it burn openly on the bark strip, barely 25 yards from the German hide. The flame was a command, an impossibility, a threat so direct and so close that no trained soldier could ignore it without verification. You cannot teach men to disregard a fire burning 30 feet from their position. You can only hope they respond slowly. These did not. 2 silhouettes shifted simultaneously. Sniper and spotter trying to realign for an immediate countershot, trying to identify the American position, trying to assess the threat. That was their mistake. Jesse had already settled behind the Springfield. The first shot cracked across the fog. The German sniper collapsed. The second shot followed 1 second later. The spotter dropped. A third German, realizing too late what was happening, tried to retreat deeper into the timber pile. The third round caught him mid-step. He fell across the first body and did not move again. 11 seconds. 3 bodies. 0 German rounds fired. Tommy exhaled like he had been underwater. "That was a firing squad," he said. "That was sequence pressure," Jesse said. They couldn't not follow the chain. The fog had given him a new tool, sequential stimuli, multiple points of light that created a decision tree for the enemy. Orient to first match, adjust to second, commit to third, expose on fourth. It was mechanical, it was predictable, and it was devastating. By 0800 hours, Jesse had executed 3 more multi-match sequences. By noon, 19 additional Germans had died. Cumulative total, 33. But the real evolution was not in the number of kills, it was in the type. He was no longer just pulling out snipers, he was pulling out observers, radio men, machine gun crews, anyone trained to monitor signals and report enemy activity. The German coordination network was beginning to fracture. The forest was becoming theirs. And then, at 1300 hours, Tommy intercepted a radio transmission. Fragmentary, encoded. but clear enough. They're telling them not to look, Tommy said. He sounded almost hopeful. New orders. Ignore all light sources. Do not react. Do not investigate. Do not turn heads. Tommy looked at Jesse, waiting for disappointment, waiting for frustration. Jesse smiled. That doesn't kill the trick, Jesse said. That opens a new one. The word he used was inversion. 1,400 hours. The fog had thinned, but the canopy still suppressed most of the daylight. Shadows lay deep across the forest floor. Visibility poor, sound traveling unevenly, perfect conditions. Jesse had identified a German machine gun nest that had pinned down an American platoon for 2 days. He did not call for artillery, did not signal the advance, did not even reveal that he had located them. He just studied the position, the angle of the logs, the depth of cover, the likely firing slit, the probable fallback position. Then he moved, not toward the target, behind it, a wide flank, nearly 40 yards of crawling, placing himself in a narrow seam where the brush opened to a faint corridor of visibility, where the trees thinned just enough to let light pass. Tommy followed, confused, frustrated. "Why are we going this way?" Tommy hissed through the radio. "Because this is where the light needs to be," Jesse said. He reached the position, settled, struck a match, and held it behind him. Arm extended back toward the American lines. 3 seconds. In those 3 seconds, something extraordinary happened. The flame did not illuminate the Germans directly. It illuminated the space between them and Jesse, created a momentary backlight. 3 heads became visible as silhouettes. 2 shoulders, 1 firing aperture, all projected against the faint orange glow. Enough. Jesse extinguished the match. The forest collapsed back to shadow, but he had the geometry now, the exact positions, the firing solutions. 7 seconds. 3 shots. The machine gun nest went silent. Tommy was still processing what he had seen. "That was not a trick," Tommy said quietly. "That was X-ray vision." "That was doctrine inversion," Jesse said. "They won't look at light anymore. So I used light to reveal them from behind." The German countermeasure had become their new vulnerability. By ordering their men not to react to light, Richter had created soldiers who could not see what the light exposed behind them. And if they could not see what light revealed, Jesse could reconstruct their positions with surgical clarity. Day 2 ended with the count at 52. 15 matches remained. 2 days left. The German sniper network was no longer degraded. It was collapsing. December 11th, Day 3. Intelligence brought Jesse a new problem, a German company headquarters. Estimated 15 to 20 personnel. Well defended, hidden in a reinforced bunker complex 200 yards behind the forward line. Attacking it would cost American lives. Artillery would be wasteful without confirmed targets in the open. "I can make them come outside," Jesse said. The intelligence officer blinked. "How light?" Jesse said. "Same way I've been doing it." He took 3 matches, moved into position before dawn, placed them in a triangle around the suspected headquarters location. 60 yards per side, each match positioned to suggest infiltrators. American scouts probing the perimeter, testing the defenses. 730. He lit the first match. North side. Let it burn 3 seconds. Out. From the bunker complex movement, 2 officers emerged to assess, trying to determine if the light represented a threat or a mistake. 732. Second match. East side. Same duration. More movement. A runner emerged. A radio man checking lines. The command staff beginning to coordinate a response to what looked like enemy reconnaissance. 734. Third match. South side. Now the entire headquarters was reacting. Officers outside the bunker, gathered in a cluster, trying to verify what was happening, trying to communicate, trying to make decisions. Perfect. Lieutenant McKenna, the artillery observer, had been watching through binoculars from an adjacent position. He keyed his radio. "Hart, is that what I think it is?" "Yes," Jesse said. "Hit it now." "Jesus Christ," McKenna whispered. The fire mission went out. 6 rounds of 105mm high explosive. The first round hit 8 seconds later. Direct impact on the cluster of German officers. The second round followed. Then the third. The bombardment lasted 40 seconds. When the smoke cleared, the headquarters bunker was burning. Estimated casualties 20 plus. The German command structure for the entire sector had just been shattered because Jesse had made them think their perimeter was being probed, because he had forced them outside, because light had become a language he could speak and they could only obey. Tommy stared at the burning complex, his voice hollow. Jesse, this is beyond sniping. Jesse packed his gear. 9 matches left. 1 day remaining. I'm not killing snipers anymore, he said. I'm killing their framework. That was the inflection point. The moment the Matchbox method transcended individual combat and became organizational warfare. Jesse was no longer hunting men. He was hunting command structures, decision hierarchies, communication protocols, the rhythms of how forces behaved under stimulus. And once you understand how a force behaves, you do not need to see it. You can predict it. And once you can predict it, you can shape it. By 1600 hours, the German coordination in the sector had collapsed entirely. Communications erratic. Patrol timing broken. Sniper support protocols fractured. Machine gun emplacements losing discipline. Headquarters units relocating in panic. All because of matches and the men who could not stop themselves from looking. The cumulative count stood at 62 confirmed kills from Jesse's rifle, 48 additional casualties from the artillery and coordinated fires he had directed. 110 total German soldiers, dead or wounded, because a coal miner from Kentucky had learned to read human behavior the same way he had learned to read gas buildup in a mine shaft. And Richter, sitting in his command bunker, finally acknowledged what was happening. He issued one last order: find the American sniper, kill him immediately. Do not wait for ideal conditions. Advance in teams, hunt him aggressively. It was the first smart tactical decision the Germans had made in 3 days. And it would be the last decision many of them ever made. Because tomorrow Jesse Franklin Hart would face an enemy who understood his method, who could reverse it, who thought the same way he did. Tomorrow would bring the duel. But first Jesse had to survive the night. 2,000 hours. December 11th, Jesse alone, reviewing his notebook by candlelight in a shallow foxhole. 62 marks, each one a person. Not enemies in some abstract sense. People with sequences. People who had responded to stimuli the way their biology demanded. People who had died for the crime of being human. Flashback memories bled through without permission. Father's body pulled from the mine shaft. The smell of coal dust and death. The empty canary cage still clutched in dead fingers. Eleanor's face when they told her how she aged 10 years and 10 seconds. How her hands folded and her eyes went somewhere else. Rabbits as a boy. The ear twitched before the bolt. The freeze reflex that made them predictable. The same sequence in different species. Germans through the scope. The moment before death. Fractional head movements. Following light like moths to flame. No different than rabbits. No different at all. Jesse's hands started shaking. He could not stop them. His breath came short and shallow. Tommy found him like this, hunched in the foxhole, trembling. You okay? Jesse looked up. His face was gray in the candlelight. No, but we finished this. Pause. Long silence. After this is over, Tommy, I'm done. No more tricks, no more sequences, no more ghosts. Tommy did not understand, not yet. But he sat down beside Jesse in the foxhole, and they did not speak for a long time. Just 2 men in the dark, waiting for dawn, waiting for the final day. December 12th, 13:30 hours. Jesse was scanning through the scope. Forest quiet. Tommy beside him with binoculars. Then a match flared, 100 yards to Jesse's left. 3 seconds of deliberate flame. Clean, controlled, professional, in a place where no American soldier should be. Time seemed to slow. Jesse's breathing stopped. The sulfur smell carried on the wind, but it was not from his match. Tommy's breathing stopped too. Jess, he whispered, he's using your signal. Jesse's voice came out flat, calm, empty of emotion. He's using my language. This isn't bait. This is communication. Someone on the German side had finally understood what Jesse was doing, had watched for 3 days, had seen the sequence, had recognized the methodology, and now that someone was trying to turn it back. The match was not an attempt to lure Jesse into exposure. It was an attempt to map him, to identify his reaction time, his movement rhythms, his response protocols, to do exactly what Jesse had been doing to the Germans. Two predators, same forest, same method, neither willing to make the first mistake. For 10 minutes, nothing happened. Just two men breathing in separate hides, both knowing the other was watching, both refusing to give the tell that would mean death. At 13:40, another match flared. Different position, different angle, 30 degrees offset from the first. Triangulation. Jesse recognized it immediately. Standard sniper doctrine for position identification. At 13:50, the third match appeared. 45 degrees from the second. The triangulation complete. Jesse did the math in his head. 3 points of observation. Standard sniper doctrine for position identification. The German had just narrowed Jesse's possible location to a 30-yard radius. Close enough to be dangerous. Tommy's voice was tight with fear. We need to move. No, Jesse said. If we move, we confirm position. If we stay still, he has to guess. 2 hours passed. Neither man fired, neither man moved, both listening for breathing rhythm. Fabric against bark. The tiny scrape of a scope adjusting. Any micro sound that would give away position. Both sweating despite the December cold. Both knowing with absolute certainty that the first impulse would be the last mistake. At 15:45, Tommy broke the silence. How do we beat a man who thinks the same way you do? Jesse considered the question. Turned it over in his mind like a piece of coal looking for the seam. You break symmetry, he said. How 3 matches lit simultaneously. Different positions. Tommy stared at him. That's impossible for one person. Exactly, Jesse said. That's why it will work. For the past 2 hours while appearing to do nothing, Jesse had been preparing. 3 match positions. North at 45 yards, west at 38, south at 41. Each one placed during micro movements. Each position connected by paracord stripped from his pack. Each match head touching a small bundle of dry tinder. A distributed ignition framework. Crude, improvised, barely functional. But it would create the illusion of impossibility. I need you to light the south match when I signal, Jesse said. Tommy understood what was being asked. Understood that if this failed, they would both die in the next 10 seconds. If this doesn't work, Tommy said, then he was better. Jesse finished. At 16:15, Jesse gave the signal. A single finger raised. Tommy struck the south match. Simultaneously, Jesse ignited the north position using the paracord fuse, then the west using his rifle stock as a striker. 3 flames, 3 directions, less than 1 second separation, 100 yards away. Through the scope of a German rifle, a man saw something his training said was impossible. Obergefreiter Heinrich Weber had been a mathematics teacher in Stuttgart before the war. He understood sequences, understood probability, and he understood that what he was seeing violated both. 3 matches, 3 positions. Solo operator. The math did not work, which meant either the American had a team contradicting all intelligence, or the American had prepositioned ignition frameworks, or this was an elaborate trap. Weber made his decision in half a second. He had to gather information, had to observe all 3 flame points to understand the geometry, had to shift his position 6 inches to expand his sight line. 6 inches, 2 degrees of angle. Enough for Jesse's scope to catch the edge of a shoulder. The Springfield fired once. Heinrich Weber died without ever pulling his trigger. The bullet entered below his right collarbone and tore through both lungs and his spine. He was dead before his body understood it should fall. Jesse kept the scope on the German position for 30 seconds, watching for secondary threats. Nothing. Clear, he said finally. Then Jesse did something that violated every tactical protocol. He crawled forward toward the German position. Across open ground. Tommy hissing protest, but Jesse was not listening. He reached the German hide 3 minutes later. Found the body. Found the rifle. Found a worn notebook beside the corpse. The notebook was open to the last entry, written in precise Germanic script. Jesse could not read German, but he understood numbers, understood dates, understood the careful notations of a man who approached killing the same way Jesse did, as mathematics, as sequence, as framework. Jesse closed the notebook gently, put it in his pack. Then he took the German's identification tags. Weber Heinrich, Obergefreiter, born 1916, age 28, Stuttgart, a mathematics teacher who had learned to read sequences, who had understood what Jesse was doing, who had been good enough to reverse the method, just not quite fast enough. Jesse crawled back, Tommy staring at him with something between awe and horror. You respected him, Tommy said. I killed him, Mita said. Respect is the least I owe. Jesse looked at Heinrich Weber's notebook, thought about all the Germans who had died in the past 4 days. 67 now counting Weber. 67 men who had followed their training and died because their training had become the weapon used against them. For the first time since the Matchbox method had started working, Jesse felt something crack inside his chest. He turned away from Tommy and vomited into the frozen leaves, his hands shaking. Tommy reached for him. You all right, Jesse wiped his mouth. Straighten. No, he said. But we finished this. December 12th, 1400 hours. The duel was over, but the day was not done. The German defensive line had consolidated, pulled back, no more forward sniper positions. But 40-plus soldiers remained dug into fortified positions between the American lines and the objective. Jesse pulled the matchbox from his pocket. 6 matches remain. The last 6 of the 48 he had carried into Hurtgen Forest 4 days ago. 6 was enough. He spent the afternoon not hunting individuals, but creating movement, placing matches at patrol route intersections, at supply line choke points, at observation post approaches, not to kill directly, to force predictable motion that artillery and machine guns could exploit. At 1600, a match flared near a German ammunition depot. 6 Germans emerged to verify the threat. An American machine gun position coordinated with a Jesse through prearranged signals opened fire. 6 bodies dropped. At 1730, Jesse created a sequence that simulated American infiltration on the German left flank. The German defensive line shifted to respond, opened a gap. American infantry poured through without taking casualties. At 1800, as the winter darkness began to settle over Hurtgen, Jesse fired his final shot. A German observer standing to report a light source. 1 round. His 67th and final kill. The last bullet Jesse Franklin Hart would fire in anger for the rest of his life. By 1830, the German resistance in the sector had collapsed. Not because all the Germans were dead, because they could not function, could not coordinate, could not trust their own senses. American forces had advanced 800 yards in 1 day, more ground than they had taken in the previous 2 weeks combined. The toll was counted that evening. 67 confirmed kills from Jesse's rifle, 52 additional casualties from artillery and coordinated fires that Jesse had directed, 119 total German soldiers dead because of a matchbox and the man who understood human behavior better than the humans themselves. American casualties in Jesse's sector over 4 days of operation, 0. At 1900 hours, Jesse pulled the matchbox from his pocket one last time. 5 matches remained inside. He struck one, not for hunting, not for killing, just to watch it burn. The flame was steady in the cold December air. Orange light that had killed 67 men over 4 days. He let it burn completely down to his fingertips until the heat forced him to drop it. The other 5 went back into the box, unburnt, witnesses to what had been done. Tommy watched him silent. What are you doing? Tommy said finally. Saying goodbye, Jesse said. He closed the matchbox, put it in his pocket, picked up his rifle and began the walk back to the American lines. I'm done reading, he said. The internal silence was louder than any gunfire he had ever heard. Division Headquarters, December 14th, 1944. Debriefing. Colonel Harrison sat behind a field desk, looked up when Jesse entered. His eyes went to the sergeant's stripes, then to Jesse's face. Something in that face made the colonel pause. 67 confirmed kills, Sergeant. 4 days. How Jesse placed the matchbox on the desk, said nothing. Harrison picked it up, turned it over. Just a standard Army-issue matchbox, cheap cardboard, faded print. You killed 67 Germans with matches. I killed them with their training, sir. The matches just showed me where to shoot. Harrison studied Jesse's face. Saw something burnt out there. Something hollowed. The kind of emptiness that comes not from cowardice, but from seeing too clearly. We need to document this. Train others. This could save thousands of American lives. No, sir. The refusal hung in the air. Harrison's expression hardened. That's an order, Hart. With respect, sir, some things shouldn't be taught. Harrison leaned back. Explain. You teach men to see enemies as sequences so they can't unsee it. Not after the war. Not ever. This method changes how you think. Changes what you are. I don't want an army full of men like me. You just want us a sector we've been bleeding for. I killed 119 men who were following the same doctrine. We teach our soldiers, sir, turn their training into a death sentence. You standardize this method, you teach it, it stops being a tactic. It becomes something else. What a way to stop seeing people as people. Harrison was quiet for a long time. Outside the bunker, the sound of artillery, the war continuing, men dying for yards of frozen mud. Finally, Harrison nodded. I'll mark your file as tactics non-replicable. Circumstance specific. Thank you, sir. Harrison looked at the matchbox again, then at Jesse. For what it's worth, Sergeant, I think you made the right choice. Both times, Jesse did not ask what he meant. He knew. The right choice to use the method when it was needed. The right choice to bury it afterward. He saluted, left the bunker. The matchbox went into his duffel bag. He would not look at it again for 40 years. May 26, 1945. A parade ground in France. The war in Europe over. Victory declared. Men going home. Jesse Franklin Hart stood at attention while a general pinned a Medal of Honor to his chest. The citation was read aloud. For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at risk of life above and beyond the call of duty. Sergeant Hart eliminated 67 enemy combatants through innovative tactical methods enabling infantry advance with 0 friendly casualties. The words sounded hollow to Jesse. Clinical. They described actions but not costs, numbers but not names, results but not reasons. That night, he put the medal in his duffel bag next to the matchbox. Did not look at them again for decades. June 1945. Harlan County, Kentucky. The train station. Eleanor Hart was 56 years old now, gray in her hair, lines in her face that had not been there when Jesse left. Martha was 25, married to her sweetheart, already pregnant with her first child. Ruth was 22, working as a nurse, carrying the weight of what she had seen in field hospitals. They were waiting when Jesse stepped off the train. He looked 20 years older than when he had left. Something in his eyes had changed. Something had gone away, and something else had taken its place. No words, just embrace. Eleanor held her son and felt how thin he had become, how rigid, like he was holding himself together through pure will. That night at dinner, Ruth asked the question, "Will you tell us about it?" Jesse looked at his plate, at the food his mother had prepared, real food, not rations, not survival, just a meal made with love. Nothing worth telling, he said. Eleanor reached across the table, took his hand. You did what you had to, Jesse. That's what scares me, Mama. That it came so easy. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of understanding. The understanding that some things cannot be spoken. Some costs cannot be calculated. Some debts cannot be paid. Jesse Franklin Hart came home from war, but part of him never left Hurtgen Forest. Part of him was still there in the December cold, still watching through a scope, still counting marks in a notebook, still learning that human beings are just sequences waiting to be exploited. He tried the mines first, went back to work as a shift supervisor in 1945, lasted 6 months, could not stand the darkness anymore, could not stand the enclosed spaces, could not stand listening for sequences in the creaking timber and tasting metal in the air. Everything reminded him of watching, of waiting, of predicting what came next. In 1946, he switched to teaching, shop class at the county high school, teaching boys to build things instead of destroy them, teaching them to work with wood and metal and patience, teaching them that creation was possible, that you could use your hands for something other than killing. He found peace there, not happiness exactly, but something like purpose. The boys liked him, respected him. He was quiet and patient, and he never lost his temper. He could explain complex things simply, could show them how frameworks worked, how pieces fit together, how to read grain in wood and stress in metal. He never told them about the war. In 1947, he married Sarah Mitchell. She was a local girl, had been a nurse during the war, worked in a field hospital in Belgium. She had seen things too, different things than Jesse, but things that left similar scars. They understood each other's silences. That was enough, more than enough. They had two children, John in 1949, Anna in 1952. Jesse was a good father, present, attentive, never raised his voice, never raised his hand, but there was a distance there, a place the children could not reach, a room in his mind that stayed locked. Sarah saw it, never pushed, just loved him and gave him space and understood that some doors stay closed for good reasons. The years passed. Jesse taught shop class, raised his children, attended church on Sundays not because he believed in salvation, but because community mattered, because showing up mattered, because normal mattered even when you did not feel normal inside. He could not stop seeing sequences in students' behavior, in traffic flow, in weather frameworks, in everything. The world was full of if-then chains, full of stimulus-response pairs, full of predictable outcomes waiting to be calculated. But he refused to exploit them anymore, refused to use what he saw. That was the bargain he had made with himself. He would see, but he would not act. He would know, but he would not use. He would carry the skill, but never deploy it. Sarah noticed. She noticed everything. It was 1955, late at night. They were sitting on the porch, summer heat, crickets, the children asleep inside. You see something in a people, don't you? Something the rest of us don't. Jesse looked at her, considered lying, decided against it. I used to, trying to forget how. She did not ask what he meant, did not need to. She took his hand and they sat in silence, and that was answer enough. The incident happened in 1963. Jesse was 45 years old. His grandson Michael was 12. The boy was helping Jesse move boxes in the garage when he found the duffel bag, found the Medal of Honor inside, tarnished from years of neglect, but unmistakable. Michael came running, the medal in his hand, eyes wide. Grandpa, is this real? Jesse looked up from the workbench, saw the medal, felt something tighten in his chest, long time ago. Different person. How many Germans did you kill? Jesse met the boy's eyes, held them the same way he had held a scope on a target, the same steadiness, the same focus, enough that I stopped counting. The medal went back in the bag, the conversation ended. Michael never asked again, but the question stayed with Jesse. How many? As if the number mattered, as if 67 was somehow different than 66 or 68, as if the mathematics changed anything about what it meant. 1984, the 40th anniversary of the Battle of Hurtgen Forest, military historians doing research, finding stories buried in classified files, discovering Jesse's operation through cross-referenced casualty reports and after-action reviews. A reporter from Louisville tracked him down. Jesse was 66 years old now, retired from teaching, living quietly with Sarah in the same house where he had been born. The reporter was young, enthusiastic, saw this as a story about heroism, about American ingenuity, about individual excellence changing the course of battle. Mr. Hart, military historians are calling your operation one of the most effective individual combat actions of World War II. Will you talk about it? No. Why not? Because 119 men died. That's not something to celebrate. But you saved American lives. Does it make the German mother's sons less dead? The reporter published the article anyway. Local hero refuses recognition. Decorated veteran lives humbly. Medal of Honor recipient wants no attention. Jesse's former students read it, came to him with questions, wanted to hear war stories, wanted to understand what their quiet shop teacher had done. Jesse told them the same thing he told everyone. Paper got it wrong. I'm not a hero. Heroes are the men who didn't make it back. Fort Benning Sniper School started requesting Jesse speak to students in 1985. They wanted him to share his tactical innovations, wanted him to explain the Matchbox method, wanted to incorporate his techniques into doctrine. He declined. They asked again the next year. He declined again. This continued for 10 years. Every year a new request. Every year the same answer. No. In 1995, he finally wrote them a letter, his last word on the subject. I will not teach what I did. Not because it didn't work, because it worked too well. You teach men to see enemies as sequences, they can't unsee it even after war ends. Some innovations work so well they change what you are. Protect your soldiers from becoming what I became. The letter went into his file, a warning from a man who understood the cost of perfect efficiency. The years continued. Jesse grew older. His hair went white. His hands developed tremors from a lifetime of work. But his mind stayed sharp, too sharp, still seeing sequences, still calculating probabilities, still knowing what people would do before they did it. It was a curse disguised as a gift, or maybe a gift that had curdled into curse. He was never sure which. Sarah died in 2006, 89 years old. Heart failure. She went peacefully in her sleep. Jesse held her hand through that final night, felt the rhythm of her pulse slow and stop, and knew exactly when she was gone. He sat beside her bed for an hour after, not crying, not speaking, just sitting with the woman who had understood his silence for 59 years. They had built something together. Not despite the war, not around it, but through it. She had been his anchor, his proof that normal was possible, that you could carry ghosts and still build a life. Now she was gone, and Jesse was 88 years old and alone for the first time in 60 years. His children wanted him to move in with them, wanted to take care of him, but Jesse stayed in the house, stayed surrounded by the things he and Sarah had built, the life they had made, the normal they had constructed out of the pieces war had left them. June 2008. Jesse was 90 years old, lung disease, a combination of coal dust from his youth and age and the simple wearing out of a body that had carried too much for too long. He was in the hospital, surrounded by family. John was 59 now. Anna was 56. Grandchildren, great-grandchildren, a whole tree of life that had grown from the man who had learned to read death in Hurtgen Forest. Michael came, 57 years old now. He brought the duffel bag. "Grandpa, I kept these safe for you." He showed Jesse the contents. The Medal of Honor. The notebook with 67 tally marks. The matchbox. Jesse looked at the matchbox. 5 matches still inside, unburnt for 64 years. His hands shook as he reached for it. Not from disease, from memory. "I never told anyone why I kept those 5. The family leaned in, quiet, listening. 43 I struck. 67 men died because of them. These 5, they're for the men I might have killed if I kept going. Reminder that I chose to stop, that I could still choose." The silence that followed was profound. The kind of silence that holds weight, that carries meaning, that says more than words ever could. Jesse looked at his grandson. "Don't waste shots. Don't count bodies. And if you ever learn to see sequences in people, remember they're still people." Those were the last coherent words Jesse Franklin Hart spoke. He died at 02:34 hours on June 9, 2008, 90 years old, surrounded by the family he had built from the ashes of war. Arlington National Cemetery, June 14, 2008. Full military honors, 21-gun salute. The flag folded with precise military geometry and presented to his son John. Sarah was buried here too. They would rest together. The headstone was simple. Jesse had specified it in his will. No flourishes, no drama, just facts. Jesse Franklin Hart, Sergeant United States Army, Medal of Honor, 1918 to 2008. No mention of 119. No mention of matches. Just a name and a rank and an honor. The truth was in what was left unsaid. Tommy Brennan attended the funeral, 79 years old now. Retired from the Philadelphia police force where he had worked for 35 years after the war. He had never spoken publicly about Hurtgen. Never would. He stood at the graveside after the others had left. Just him and the fresh-turned earth and the memory of a foxhole in December 1944. "You carried it better than most," would have Tommy said to the headstone. "Better than I could have." He placed a single wooden match on the grave, unlit, then walked away. Some debts are paid in silence. In 2010, Michael Hart donated his grandfather's effects to the Harlan County Historical Society, the Medal of Honor, the notebook with 67 tally marks, and the matchbox. The matchbox still contained 5 wooden matches, unburnt since December 12, 1944. On the side of the box in Jesse's handwriting, faded but legible, were the words he had written 66 years earlier. Hurtgen, December 1944. 43 matches struck, 5 saved. 67 kills, 119 total dead. Never again. The museum put them in a climate-controlled display case, behind glass, under soft light, next to a description card that Michael had written based on his grandfather's final words. These 5 unburnt matches were kept by Sergeant Jesse Franklin Hart for 64 years. When asked why he said they are my witness, my memorial to the men who died, and my reminder that I could choose to stop. The display became one of the most visited exhibits in the small museum. People came from across the country, veterans, historians, students. They stood in front of the case and looked at 5 small wooden matches and tried to understand what they represented. Most could not. Most saw only an odd memorial, a strange keepsake, an eccentric gesture from an old soldier. But some understood, usually the older veterans, the ones who had killed and lived with it, the ones who knew that the hardest part of war is not the fighting, but the coming home. An old man visited in 2011, veteran of Vietnam, sniper himself. He stood in front of the case for 20 minutes, not moving, just looking. The museum curator approached him, asked if he needed anything. The old man shook his head. Your grandfather understood something most men don't. Winning a war and living with victory, those are different things. He won, but he paid for it every day after. The curator nodded. She had heard variations of this before. Those 5 matches he saved, the old man continued. Those were his witness, his memorial, and his proof that even in war, even with a method that worked perfectly, a man could still choose to be human. He turned to leave, then stopped. Tell people that, make sure they know. The matches aren't the story. The choice to stop striking them is the story. Fort Benning Sniper School, current edition of the training manual, Chapter 12, Historical Innovation. The entry is brief, clinical, no name given, just facts stripped of context. 1944. American sniper developed psychological exploitation tactic using light sources to trigger involuntary human responses. 67 confirmed eliminations, 4 days Hurtgen Forest sector. Method never replicated. Records indicate operator refused to teach technique, citing human cost of systematic behavioral weaponization. Operator's final statement to command. Some things shouldn't be taught, not because they don't work, because they work too well. The entry ends there. No elaboration, no technical details, no instruction on implementation, just a warning. Instructors at Fort Benning sometimes reference it during ethics training, during the classes on rules of engagement, during the discussions about what separates soldiers from killers. They tell students about the unnamed sergeant who turned human biology into a weapon, who killed 67 men in 4 days with a nickel's worth of matches, who could have taught others but refused, who understood that some innovations are too efficient, too perfect, too likely to change what you are. The students ask questions, want details, want to know how it worked, want to replicate it. The instructors tell them no. Tell them the method died with the man who invented it. Tell them that's exactly how it should be. Then they move on to the next lesson. But some students remember, some understand, some grasp that the real lesson is not about tactics. It's about choices, about limits, about knowing when to stop even when you could continue, about keeping 5 matches unburnt. The Matchbox sits in Harlan County Historical Society today, behind glass, under controlled temperature and humidity. The cardboard is fragile now, 80 years of age, but it's intact, preserved, and inside 5 wooden matches remain. They will never be struck, never burn, never illuminate anything except what they represent. Jesse Franklin Hart's final testimony. His proof that prediction is not the same as action, that seeing is not the same as exploiting, that you can know what will happen and still choose not to make it happen, that you can carry the skill and refuse to use it, that you can see people as sequences and still remember their people. Doctrine says, find cover, stay hidden, wait for the target. That's what the manual teaches. That's what gets passed down from instructor to student, generation to generation. Jesse Franklin Hart said, make them look, control what they see, control the battlefield. And he proved it could be done. Proved it with mathematical precision over 4 days in December 1944. He controlled it perfectly. turned human nature into a weapon, made biology into a vulnerability, transformed the oldest reflex in the human brain into a death sentence. Then he spent 63 years trying to forget he had learned how. The Matchbox still holds 5 matches unburnt since December 12, 1944, 64 years in a duffel bag, then another 16 in a museum, 80 years total, witnesses to what was done and what was not done, to action and restraint, to innovation and refusal. But the lesson remains: some sequences should not be taught. Not because they don't work, because they work too well. And the cost of perfect efficiency is measured not in enemy dead, but in the parts of yourself that die with them, in the pieces of your humanity you leave on the battlefield, in the distance that grows between who you were and who you become. Jesse Franklin Hart understood that. He understood it at 26 years old in a frozen forest in Germany. He understood it at 45 when his grandson asked how many. He understood it at 90 when he explained why he kept 5 matches unburnt for 64 years. He understood that some victories cost more than defeats, that some methods work so well they change you into something you don't want to be. That efficiency is not the same as right, that being able to do something is not the same as should. That's why he was a hero, not for the 67 kills, not for the tactical innovation, not for the Medal of Honor, for the choice to stop, for the refusal to teach, for the 5 matches kept unburnt, for understanding that the real battle is not against the enemy, it's against becoming something you can't come back from. Jesse Franklin Hart won that battle, but only barely, and only by choosing not to fight it perfectly. He died knowing he had done what was necessary in 1944, and knowing he had prevented it from becoming doctrine, from spreading, from turning other men into what he had been. The matches remain: 5 small pieces of wood and sulfur, ordinary objects that represent extraordinary restraint. They sit behind glass in a small museum in Kentucky and tell a story that most people don't understand. The story is not about innovation, it's about limitation, not about capability, but about choice, not about what you can do, but about what you refuse to do, not about the 43 matches that burned, about the 5 that never did. That's the legacy of Jesse Franklin Hart. Not the killing, the stopping, not the method, the refusal to pass it on, not the war he won, the peace he chose. The 5 matches remain unburnt, and that is exactly as it should be.